people to be with. Prue mentioned to you that I'm on the business side here. So it's really amazing to be around so many folks who really come from the engineering technical industry side. I do take pride in thinking of myself as someone who's competent in that space, but I love business. I love buildings. I love figuring out a market. And this has been a great space for innovation to bring Passive House and figure out how does it really translate to real tangible, reality on the ground. And I think that's everybody's objective here. So I'll walk you today through 52 Fisher Ave, which is a project in Boston that I just finished. We actually finished the building in December, and we actually just completed marketing and construction. So this is hot off the press, and you can see it here. It's 6 units of condos, and it's pending Passive House low energy certification. It's almost net zero, and I'll share with you more about that. But to give you some background, Prue alluded, I've been in real estate for about 2 decades, primarily focused on development of large scale commercial projects. Always had an interest on energy performance and just metrics, because ultimately energy means savings, means more money in people's pockets. And it's just a trend that's been, people have talked about for decades. So nothing new here. And it continues to evolve. I thought when I did the FIAS training that it was fantastic. It was a great framework. It was so much better than my education as an architect. And I went to, I think, pretty darn good school. And I really was hooked. Of course, I never can pull off a project without a great team. And it's really folks like you who are committed, who are always trying to advance their practice to the highest standard, and then willing to put in the time, the thought, the hours, and the frustrations to pull off projects. But with buildings, though, I have to say, you're nothing without a good construction crew. And I hit the jackpot with this team. The gentleman in the middle, Manny Reynoso, was just a stand-up, someone who could write the best management book. Construction sites aren't labs. They're places that are very, very difficult to screw things up. And this team was really by my side, always looking for a solution, willing to work, bringing everybody to the table to solve a problem. And they were the first, when we got shut down during COVID last April, they were on the roof tightening the building so that we wouldn't get any water damage. And then they were the first back in to restart as soon as that order was lifted. And again, why Passive House today? Well, I guess, as you all know, it's policy. It's you can't run away from it. Sometimes I wonder what other folks in business are doing. There's constant activity, there's action from a lot of activists, and you really just have to engage with it. I think that's how you stay relevant. And it's exciting to me, as someone who lives in Boston, to see how Mayor Walsh's visioning of carbon neutrality for Boston, some tactile metrics, really brought the conversation in my mind more to the center, and helped me as a business owner kind of say, hey, how can I craft a business around some of these shared values? You all know everything about performance, and I'm not going to go there. But the image here on the slide shows you sort of the pitch that we would use when we would talk to folks about what is Passive House. So, love to share with you a little bit about what made this development at 52 Fisher Ave. What are some of the parameters and goals? This site is located in an area called Mission Hill, which is about 10 minutes from downtown Boston. It's in a community that is sort of always been considered a rental market for students. So that's not great for them, but it's a beautiful area with trees and hills, and quite diverse in its nature. It's also really close to the heart of the medical industry in Boston, Longwood Medical Center. And this location in particular was a site that a lot of people actually didn't want to develop. So when I met with the community and we were talking about the viability of a project, I had initially wanted to develop rental housing. And they came back and said, we're tired, we're fed up. We want people who are going to live here, and they're going to come and work in our schools and be part of the fabric of this community. And I really was very much, I couldn't believe, their vision was so clear. And so I went back and tried to work the numbers and figure out, can we do this, talk to the banks and investors, and we were able to pull it off. And this is sort of where the work of approaching things with this eye towards solving a problem that's real, whether it's energy or what type of housing, that's always been at the heart of sort of what drives my approach to business and is the problem solving. So we needed to find a buyer that would live in Mission Hill. And we had said it's going to be first-time home buyers, most likely. And we're going to have to keep the price point relatively low. Boston is one of the top 3 most expensive housing markets in the country. And it really hurts a lot of people. And it's priced out actually a majority of people. You know, when you're that expensive, so there's a lot to do here. And then we also want it to be a destination. So in my mind, you have to be the best product and you have to offer great everything. So I thought, you know, if it's going to be first-time home buyers who are aware, who care about, you know, their values sort of are the millennial values that have shifted from my generation, where there's a lot more greater focus on sustainability. And that was the plan. And the plan was to finish it in 18 months. Nothing crushes a project's returns like delays. So the site itself couldn't have been more challenging in terms of its topography. It was really more conducive to creating like a community bunny ski slope. It was about a 60-foot drop from the front to the back. It fronted 2 streets. You can see here what kind of elevations we're talking about. We used hybrid construction. We did a concrete foundation, steel deck for the garage, and stick on top. Terrible for a passive house project. I mean, the thermal bridging, we just, you know, it was just amazing how complicated the small building was. But we went through it, and I had a personal objective of trying to solve for solar. And this was because of something I'd experienced over the last 20 years in dealing with sustainability. So ultimately, you all know what the energy savings are for passive house, but you know, pulling off a project, just like, as you know, everybody knows, is always so difficult. So you might as well make it passive house is my pitch today. The other thing about sort of this approach of thinking about balance and hoping and aiming for net zero, you start to also think about density. And it really just started to flow, where 6-unit development most likely was going to be very close to net zero. That's why I call it almost net zero. And it really was harmonious with the urban fabric in the area. This is just another view of the site upon completion. So I just want to take a deep dive for a few moments here on a subject of buyer and price point, because with passive house, again, we're always looking, everybody I'm sure is asking about premiums. I decided to just focus on what can I get that serves, you know, how can I sell this effectively, fast, get into a market space where there isn't a ton of competition, make it a destination. And we knew this was going to be first-time home buyers. They've been priced out, and this is pre-pandemic. They love the city, you know, the whole work, live, play that all developers use. It's you know, the site is a 22-minute walk to Longwood Medical. It's a 3-minute drive, 10-minute bike ride. We're going to get those doctors in there. The student population, the career grad students are going to come and live here, and this is going to be a great project. So this was pre-pandemic. Then the pandemic hits, and everything changes. I mean, now it's a flight out of the city. Nobody wants to live in the city. Everybody's working remotely. Why do you even need to be a 10-minute walk from your office or downtown? First-time home buyers, well, you know what? The suburbs are on fire and they all want to buy there. So there was definitely that moment of pause of like, what did I get myself into? But, you know, but then again, I have to say, in these moments of like thinking about what's next, I was like, well, at least this is a great building, you know? So again, I mean, falling back on this idea of doing the best work you can and trying to achieve the highest standard, it really does get you through those moments of total uncertainty. And as we emerged from the pandemic, frankly, more the election, I would say, played a greater role. Things started to look far more positive. But during that time was when I really dove deep into how are we going to talk about this? All of a sudden, you can't really do building tours. You're going to have to be on social media, and you're going to have to communicate this through video, messaging, and it's going to have to be very quick hits on what this is all about. and translating the technical language of energy modeling and performance to simple lines that are still, of the quality that you would expect if you're someone who cares about building science was challenging, but it was definitely doable. So, we really had to go back to the basics. What does it mean to be high performance? We didn't think that using words like, oh, this is a passive house building meant anything to people, because they're like, what do I care? I know nothing about it. And I think we ultimately captured it with sort of, why would you live in a passive house? Because you can breathe better. I mean, you can sleep better, you can work better, and that just can make your life better. And those messages really started to speak to folks. I had a great sales team. My Buy Boston sales team of brokers really took it on themselves to learn passive house. They went from, sort of not being certain how they were going to respond to certain things to really asking me, does this make sense? And we always made sure that the texts and the brochures reflected things that were accurate. I even asked Passive House to review my website and the language I had there, because I just get concerned when there's a lot of greenwashing and exaggeration of what really you're doing. What we're doing is very simple. A lot of it has to do with insulation too. So I'm not a fan of overcomplicating things. This is a bit of a teaser for our Instagram page. We did a lot of video and music on, where even the ERV kind of turned cool. I'll share that with you a bit later. So, and finally, we sold out in actually 3 months. So this was a real twist to all of the events leading up to all of that uncertainty. We started marketing heavily as the building delivered at the end of December, around Christmas. I couldn't believe, but we were getting tours. And by March, we were sold out. So that was really, I mean, I can't imagine what we would have done had it not been a pandemic. But this was truly a great story of just committing to something that made sense and pulling it off. Solar is in my kind of last point that I want to cover here, because solar was really important to me. My experience with all sustainable features, they're invisible to the eye. No one can see them. People can talk about them, but like at a party, you can't pull out the energy model and say, hey, look at how my building performs. People just, you can't engage with folks that way. But solar is one of those things, and wind, you can see it. And then it takes you to a place where like, oh, there's energy here. We need energy. And with solar, you can actually tell people almost all your energy is being generated on site. You live in a building that doesn't put any carbon in the air, essentially. And that was, to me, a very compelling story. And then there is the other piece, which is the financial piece, and we're always concerned about cost. And what got me very concerned is also when I looked at pricing a residential solar array versus pricing a commercial, the pricing was ridiculous. I mean, there's almost a multiple of 2. And I kind of knew that as a developer, I had to make a choice, because I'm not going to put in the ductwork for HVAC and then tell people, go buy the mini split and you put it in, which to me felt a little bit like I was doing that. And I figured out that you might as well do it and figure out how I'm going to structurally make that happen. I asked the attorneys to look at a structure that would allow for me to pass through the solar generation credits, but give me a chance to benefit from the tax credits. We figured out a license agreement. No one was happy about the paperwork. When we were selling these units, the buyer's attorneys, all 6 of them reviewed them, and then all 6 lenders reviewed them. And ultimately, in the end, it comes down to, I'm trying to give you solar. Why don't you want it? But that shows you a little bit of the hoops you have to jump through to make something like this happen. Solar array has been installed, and we're just waiting to receive approval to power it up. And this is the project today as it stands, 6 units on Fisher Ave. And that's it for tonight. I'd love to answer any questions. I'm not sure how much time this took, but tried to really give you a very, very brief overview.
Zeina, we got lots of time. Thanks for it.
Yeah, that was really great, Zeina. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about the structure that you used to get the solar done. Like how did that work exactly?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So solar is tricky because it depends on the use of the building. If you develop rental housing or any type of investment rental property, you can, and if it's staying under your ownership, you can get the tax credit benefit and hold on to the ownership, and you can reap the benefits. In the case of a condominium, I'm selling the property as many pieces, and I had to carve out ownership of the solar array so that the land entity would hold on to it for 5 years, so it would capture the tax benefits, which individual owners could not. I would have been willing to pass the tax benefits to them, but you can only, the entity that purchases the system can be the only entity that gets the tax benefit. So that was the structure that we had to figure out. And really, I mean, sometimes when you're small and nimble and you have to figure it out, that's the best solution. Because I mean, a lot of people told me, no, you can't do it. No one does it for condos. And again, that's just another thing that people say when they haven't seen something happen. And I would say also with solar, we've just hit a tipping point, and this may have been happening for a number of years where it makes sense. I mean, solar didn't make sense 20 years ago, but also there's like a bit of a personal memory. I grew up with solar hot water on the roof of our building because my dad was an engineer, and he was just, solar was very familiar to me. I'm like, come on, my dad did this in the 80s and we can't do it in 2020. Ultimately, I'd also say I budgeted some of the costs of the solar towards marketing. So I didn't put it under, because I had to pitch it to my investors, and I figured I'm going to tighten the marketing budget and try and give them as much of a real building value. I mean, that's how you create value. I also pitched that condo fees were significantly less. So your ongoing cost is less when your energy is being paid for. So you just have to get creative. When appraisers would come and look at the building, I made sure to sit and look at what categories they were putting up there. And I had to capture all that work into the actual overall valuation for everybody's sake. And those conversations, people often, again, this is why finance is so important in our business, because they have to be captured somewhere economically.